Oh, I'm blind. Light? Light, no. Light on, light off.
Good Lord.
Speaking of the Lord, hello, Mr. Langan.
Hey, John.
My children.
How you doing, man?
Patrick, you're my child. Brennan, yeah.
Bastard child, got it.
No. Just like neighborhood kid who won't
even.
go away. I'm just like, come on, man.
Langan just demoted me from bastard child.
To Dennis the Menace, you silly motherfucker.
Well, you could be like the Artful Dodger. So it could go that way too, right? You know, Oliver
That's
Twist.
a cool character.
Yeah, it's a cool character to be. Why am I throwing you a bone like this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Something's not right. Yeah.
Getting out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. We got to get all our hostility out of the way because we have to behave for Mariana.
John, I want you to be on your best behavior, is what someone else would tell you.
I'm gonna Paul is like, don't fuck this up. And I'm like, me? And he's like, yes, you. No, look, he showed up. He showed up after all. There
it was just
Paul Tremblay. There we go.
Hey, Paul.
Now it's just going to be the four of us sitting around going, "Where's Mariana? Where is she? Is she coming? Do you think she's coming?"
Did Pat mess up the time?
Exactly.
No.
Was it 6 p.m. Argentinian time and 8 p.m.
Googled
Eastern
the
time?
shit out of that, man.
Hi.
Hello.
Hear me? Yeah. I hear you.
If there's anything that anyone, and this applies for everyone, if there's anything anyone says and a few days goes by and you're like, I wish that wasn't said, let me know, email me, and I will cut whatever it is you guys want.
That'll be everything John says.
Wow.
No, I wish he did.
I was
That
being
wasn't
nice. I was just wow. That's how it's going to be. Okay.
He's supposed to be your friend, so ouch.
I thought so too. Yeah, but that's
not related to anything. But if you hear screams, I have like 4 teenagers downstairs, and they asked for a horror movie recommendation, so I put on The Descent.
nice.
Yeah.
So you can count down to those screams.
Well, they just got through. Actually, to me, the scariest part is, when they're going through that little climbing through that really small tunnel. Mariana, have you seen that movie?
I've seen The Descent by a long time ago.
Ago, yeah.
It was scary, but I saw it at home. So, Hi, John.
Hi, Mariana.
Finally, I meet you.
I know. It's so nice to meet you. I've been so jealous of Paul getting to spend time with you.
Oh,
and he said, no, she's my friend. Stay away from her. And
no, but we will. I really, really like your work.
Thank you. Likewise.
So,
I am so privileged to have read our share of the night.
Thank you very much.
Man. Yeah. I don't know if there was there was a Saturday Night Live skit where the comedian Chris Farley sat next to Paul McCartney. And he said to Paul McCartney, he's supposed to be interviewing him. And he just said, remember that time when you and the Beatles made that song and you all went na, na, na? And Paul McCartney says, yes. And he said, that was really good. And that's how I feel. I just want to say,
that was
remember
awesome.
When you wrote that novel? That was really good. That's all I have to say. And Paul has like 5 pages of questions, apparently. Yeah. So just feel free to tell him. Just give him the finger. Just tell him no, Paul Tremblay, no.
Does anyone have any questions before we start?
So can I say that I like pineapple on pizza?
You can say anything you want, John. You wrote the fisherman.
This will be a clip. Mariana just
you do have to deal with the consequences of that statement.
But though. I like it. We used to call it Canadian pizza because it had pineapple, ham, and green onions on it. I'm just,
Really quickly, John, do you remember this head?
Oh, God.
Oh, so Paul is like, hey, you can stay in my son's room when you come to stay with me. And I was like, well, that's very nice. I'll have some privacy. And there was that head looking at me. And Paul was like, don't worry. And he just turned it so it faced the bed.
That was this past weekend. Yeah.
Paul, do you pretend to be nice and do really horrific things off screen?
Yeah. Short answer, yes.
Yeah, he's like, here, have these crackers. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And he's like, oh, you're allergic to shrimp? Those are shrimp crackers. And in the meantime, I've eaten like 5 of them.
Alrighty, welcome to Dead Headspace. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my friend, Brennan LaFaro. Say hello, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are joined by Mariana Enríquez. Say hello, Mariana.
Hello.
And we got 2 stellar co-hosts, guest hosts, the guys that actually introduced us to Mariana's work as well as our share of nights. That is John Langen. Say hello, John Langen.
Hello, John Langen.
Author of The Fisherman. And let's not forget Mr. Paul Tremblay. Say hello, Paul.
Hello.
Mariana, what got you into horror?
Oh, being a child, I think. I was a very lonely child, and my parents had a massive, like, their bookshelves were full of stuff, and I was like free reign with it. So I started reading, I don't know, Poe, Lovecraft, Henry James, Borges, that has some scary stuff, Cortázar, I mean, everything. And I was a child under the dictatorship, so it was kind of lonely, and I knew that something was very wrong out there. So that situation of being a child under an authoritarian regime, with my parents knowing what was going on, I think I found solace in horror, which is kind of strange, but I think many people that get into horror fiction will tell you that they kind of found a friend or a language or a place of, I don't know, safety when they felt unsafe. So yeah, I think it was being a child in that circumstances.
So kind of like a escapism, so you could not face the real reality of horror, or well, our reality of horror.
Yeah, I guess it's always, I guess, in some point of when you're, with the work of horror fiction in any version, I mean, a movie or a book or whatever, it's a kind of rehearsal of the real horror of life, but you're safe. You can live the same emotions, but you're safe. So I think I needed that. I needed something that mirrored the real fear that I had, but when it finished, it ended. It was okay. So and later Stephen King, obviously, but I read Stephen King when I was 12 or something. These things I read when I was 8 or 9, like really young.
Yeah, wow. Our share of night. I just want to jump into that first thing, and then they'll branch into, I don't even know at this point, but can you give us a quick synopsis of the book? And we'll start there. I got other questions, but I'm sure the other fellows do too. So yeah, can you give us a quick synopsis for potential readers, what Our Share of Night is about?
Yeah, okay. It's but basically it's a genre story, but has a lot of politics and social commentary too, and it's kind of a coming of age story of this boy, Gaspar, that happens to be the son of a medium that works for an organization called The Order, that has a relationship with a god, it's called the darkness. Nothing is called, I don't like the use in horror very specific terms, like sometimes happen in science fiction. I like it very broad. Anyway, Juan the medium is a very damaged character, and the only thing he has is this boy, and he thinks that this boy, that he knows that this boy inherited his powers, that basically destroyed his life, or kind of didn't let him have a life, basically. So the book, in part, because it has many things, but partly is how he tries to save this boy from the same future. And the question is it possible to escape from your heritage and from what is written in a way? So yeah, that's one way to summarize. I could find 20 more if you want.
Oh yeah, it's for those that don't know, it's a very thick book, and it's I'll offer my thoughts on it. I loved it, by the way, but I want to hear from Paul and then John, and then after John, Brennan, jump in at any point.
Well, hi again, Mariana. Let's talk about Juan and Gaspar a little bit, especially sort of, this isn't a spoiler, but there were 4 or 5. I mean, there are sort of larger chapters of the book where it's broken up to when there's like a big time jump. And the first long one is with, Juan with his son when his son is about 6 years old, and he's first sort of, as readers, we first sort of learn, that Juan is a medium and that like he fears that Gaspar has his powers too. I guess all that to say is that their father-son relationship is so complicated and so messy and realistic. And I love stories that are honest about, what it feels like to be a parent, like some of the negative and terrible thoughts, that you have as a parent, or as vice versa. Yeah, so I don't know if I have a question that's like more like a rambling. I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about the relationship between Juan and Gaspar?
I guess of course I'm not a son, and I did have a father, but my father was not like that at all. My father was an engineer, very into it has nothing to do with my life. But what I was thinking about a lot in terms of literature were many books about father and son relationships, where the father and son relationships are very, very complicated. One is, of course, The Odyssey, other is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. There's another one that people kind of never mention, but to me is very obvious, that is Firestarter by Stephen King. That has also a father is trying to protect the daughter. But the thing is that I didn't want the relationship of the father and the son to be just a relationship of unconditional love without anything, without any noise in that. Because this is a guy that is in the father, is a guy that he's pansexual, he's almost a god himself. He's very sick, ill at the same time. And he's in contact with this entity that gives him an enormous power. And of course, he loves the kid, but he's not a normal person. He's barely a person. And in the realistic part, there is the competition that you find between, he's a very young man, but he's a man that is very sick. So, to have a son that is very healthy and very nice and everybody likes him is something that he really envies. He wants that body, and he kind of has the possibility of taking that body in many ways. So it's all very distorted. He envies this boy. He has to hurt this boy for even ritualistic motives, and he does it because he has to, but there's some pleasure there in destroying this thing. That is a thing that he will never be. And of course, that doesn't happen in a normal father-son relationship, but you can see in fathers and sons, the competition, the old man that the body is giving in and has to kind of, see this new being that is growing up there. And I didn't, and on the end of Gaspar, I wanted to portray how even when your father is or your parent, a father or the person that is taking care of you is very abusive, the problem that causes a trauma, and I think the story is about trauma a lot, is that you can't help loving them sometimes. So, and you're very scared of them, but you always want them to change, or you try to change them, and you're put in an impossible position, but it's a position of love too, because he loves his dad, but he knows that his dad is absolutely dangerous, like an animal. So I thought about that a lot, about how human relationships have a lot of noise like we want to pretend that love is unconditional. We would never do anything bad to the people we love, but that's not true. And, of course, it's generous, so it's taken to 12, 11, 25, the volume.
Right.
But still, I wanted something of that dynamic that resonates as true, especially from Gaspar, because Gaspar, it's just a boy that is, abused by his father, not sexually abused, by the way, but and he always is like, maybe tomorrow he's okay. And I have many friends that with the alcoholic parent, for example, it's like, but when he doesn't drink, he's very nice. And you're always making excuses to other people and to yourself, because you have to explain to yourself this love. And that's what happens to him.
I also thought like the neighborhood's reaction to, so the later part of the book, the neighborhood's reaction to Juan also as like, sort of making excuses and covering up for, his physical abuse of his son.
Yeah.
So all of that was heartbreaking, with, as you said, add the genre stuff onto it, because it does play with, Juan's being cruel because he has to, in some ways he does, but of course, that's sort of the lie that Juan sort of falls under. Yeah, there's things he needs to do to protect his son, via the occult, but he doesn't have to do it the way he's doing it.
No.
So I just found that their relationship utterly, I mentioned complicated, but it was so fascinating and heartbreaking, and authentic. It felt to me. I was really impressed.
The cover up also, I mean, the justification of all the people around has a lot to do with the era. Like, it's the 80s. And it's the 80s in Buenos Aires. So there's a lot. This is a young man, a very ill man that is a widower, sorry, and he's taking care of his son alone. That is like an impossible position, because in the 80s still it was the position of the mother to do that. So people are like, oh, well, he's a man. He's kind of, he's doing his best because he's not the position that he should be in. So that also speaks a lot about how society used to work, and how society would never let a mother do that, or I don't know if that much, but a man that, doesn't know how to do, they got a lot of permissions those days. And of course, it wasn't that common, because he basically, the child would go to the grandparent or something. So to the neighborhood, there's something heroic in what he's doing, because also they don't know anything, we think.
Right.
Paula, sorry, man, I'm going to jump in real quick.
Good.
I'm so glad you asked that, because that was, one of my big thoughts, is just the complexity of that relationship and the way that it added to that authenticity. And just kind of the idea of grayness, of that there are all these problems between Juan and Gaspar, that there is no perfection, but that there absolutely, unquestionably, to the reader, is love. And I think that one thing that makes this 600-page book succeed is that kind of layer of complexity, not just in this relationship, but kind of in everything. One moment that really stuck out to me is the mirror box. And one of the reasons it stuck out to me, dogs are angry, sorry. One of the reasons it stuck out to me was just the difference in perspective from everybody involved, from Gaspar to the girl whose name is escaping me, I'm so sorry, to the parents. Yes, to the parents. And just the way that everybody looks at that situation differently. No question, really, but that's something that caught my attention, and I would like to throw it to John to talk about the novel a little bit.
Let's throw it to you, John.
Yes. Pardon me. I'm just writing down random things as we're talking, and I'm thinking about, since Mariana mentioned the Odyssey, one of the things that strikes me is I teach the Odyssey every year, and various other Greek myths, and spend a great deal of time just telling the story, like, how do we get to the Odyssey? Because most of my students don't know it. And so I'm like, listen, this is how it goes. And they're just horrified. They're just horrified, but they're fascinated. The gods did what? And it strikes me how in so many older, I guess, traditions, the gods, you really want to avoid them, because the gods are capricious, because there's just no way to know what they're going to do. I mean, unless you're like Odysseus and Athena likes you, but even then, because Athena likes you, Poseidon might hate you. I mean, that's not exactly right, but so that attracting the favor of one god, that's great, you know, for as long as it lasts. And then maybe one day Athena decides, I don't like you so much. And so there's a way in which the relationship between Gaspar and Juan takes that and brings it into this, you know, into a very, very intimate focus. Oh my God, Dad is like a kind of a god, you know, he's somewhere between, or a demigod at least, you know, he's somewhere. And if he weren't so physically disabled, so troubled, he might be terrifying, like utterly terrifying. It's almost, I feel it's almost as if the medical problems that he has, they humanize him in some way. They keep him from becoming like his own pain, his own fragility keeps him from becoming just, you know, terrible. And I think, you know, supposition that that's what he's worried about for his healthy son, that if his healthy son is a medium, you know, what's to prevent him from going that route. But so obviously that was not a question in the slightest. It did, the beginning of the parent child on the run also put me in mind of the beginning of Straub's ghost story. It's not a parent and child on the run, but you think it is at first. You think, oh, the man's, you know, and where are we going? And we're going far away. But also during that first section, they travel north into a part of the country that I know you've written about before in some of your stories. And I'm going to be a typical American and just completely blank on the name. But there they encounter the church. Like there's a suggestion of one of the things I loved about the book, and you've talked about this, I think, not that I listen to other podcast guys, but I think you've talked about it on the other I don't want them to think I'm cheating on them. But they
in the contract.
to cheat on you or not
to not.
Oh, okay. In that case, I just made this up. But you've talked about deliberately like wanting, and actually you mentioned it right now, so it wasn't on those other podcasts, but you talked about wanting to keep the supernatural elements, like to leave a certain amount of vagueness, but or indeterminacy. Maybe vagueness is not the right word, because they're very specific, and yet there's this suggestion, and I think we get it as we move up into the country, that there is just this whole context that we just don't understand. We can glimpse it, we can see, ultimately we can see into the other world, but the other world, in a way, it doesn't add up by our standards. So many of the images seem to me to be taken from tarot cards, the hanged man. But I have a coworker who gives me tarot readings, so I kept thinking, what's the reading here? What, you know? So I just I don't know how to, it just, you know, wow, that was great. So just, you know, just to feel free or just ignore me and we'll go on to Brennan, you know.
No, but I you know, there's a part, I don't know how it's translated because I can't remember, but that Gaspar asks Juan something about his physical condition, and he says, oh, you have to be thankful about my physical condition, otherwise I don't know if you wouldn't been here at all. Like, this is the only part of, you know, that keeps me, this illness, this fragility, this vulnerability in a way keeps me human. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't know where, because he doesn't have the energy to do certain things. But yeah, that part of the country, this is the border with Paraguay and Brazil. And of course, Brazil has another language, but it's a very different country from Argentina in many ways. Like they're different. It's amazing how a change of language and geography can make a country that is next to the other so different. Like, they're very happy people. It's not a generalization. There's a joy de vivre they have that we don't really. You know, we are like the goth country and in the continent. And then Paraguay is one of the very few countries in Latin America that still, for example, keeps the language the Spanish with Guarani, that is the local language of the indigenous people, and they mixed it. Like you go there, I don't understand Guarani or very few words, but I go there and they start talking in Spanish, and then they go on in Guarani. I'm like what? And it's very strange. And
Is that your reaction?
it's like, what is going on? And it's, but they would, I think they would speak all Guarani, but they don't have the language has not been transmitted complete or something like that. Or probably the Guaranis didn't have a word for, I don't know, football, something like that. Anyway, and this part is also very curious in the way that it's very mystic. Like my family, I have an auntie that, for example, goes to the psychiatrist, but also goes to the huesero.
Mhm.
The huesero is a guy that has a little pouch with bones and makes magical things, whatever. And she doesn't know if she's feeling better because of the psychiatrist or the huesero, so she keeps going to both. And this is all integrated. And also, to keep the example of my auntie, so you can see how that works in a way, that part of my family, they are all like blonde and tall because they were married to German immigrants. And I didn't choose Juan to be like tall, and I did choose Juan not to be like an indigenous person from there, because I thought it was like more pain on a body that has already been being completely destroyed in a way. They destroy their culture, they use them for the farms. They are, it was politically, it was very stupid because it was underlining something that everybody knows. And also it seems very exploitative to me. But there are Swedish immigrants, there are Lithuanian immigrants, Czech immigrants. Like you go there and it's very strange because it's this heat, it's this jungle, and this, tall, blonde men come from there, and they completely forgot their language. And it's a very mixed, in every sense, place. And of course, being a border to me is a very liminal place of my country. I mean, this is my liminal space. So I really wanted to, when the story goes very crazy and batshit crazy and very mystical, I wanted to put it there. I could have chose other places because, you have this kind of, mixtures everywhere. But this is the one I know. So I wasn't, investigating too much or making things up or anything. This is the territory of my family, of my childhood, and something I really know. Maybe I don't share, but I know I've seen that, that church is a real church. I've seen it, and it's very strange. Mm-hmm. And it's what was done by an Italian, like it says there, it was done by an Italian immigrant, and you never understand why he done that diabolical kind of, it's like a very Lovecraftian thing. And I'm sure that he didn't hear about Lovecraft in his life. He just wanted to do something out of the Divine Comedy, probably. And then the church saw it and said, no, this is too much. Like, what are you doing? This version of hell is absolutely, unacceptable.
Even the church was like,
yeah.
Whoa, stop.
It's kind of, no.
That's too much for us.
Yeah, because it's kind of rustic, so it gives you like a very strange kind of fear when you look at it. It's like not polished. It's very. So they were like, no, we don't want like an indigenous. It looked pagan, I guess, to them, and I guess this is the vibe there, and with the exuberance of the vegetation and the earth that is red, like visually is very potent. So I kind of, it's like my southern Gothic area,
right?
Let's say,
right. Can I ask you to pick up on the Gothic thing?
Yeah.
Nick Cave.
Yeah.
Okay. And also to a certain extent, David Bowie's not Gothic, but I know that Bowie and Nick Cave have been very at least it seems they've been very important to you in your life, because
Yeah.
and this is a tangent. I know it may have nothing to do with the novel, but just for my own curiosity, I have to ask,
Yeah.
can you talk about them, about the importance of their work to, I'm not sure that they necessarily had a huge impact specifically on Our Share of the Night, but just in general on your aesthetic and your approach to writing.
Well, in general, both of them in very different ways. Like Bowie, to me, always the androgyny first, and also in the androgyny, the changes, to paraphrase him, like the ability to be always not being exactly what you think he is, and this kind of, where is he? The artifice. I kind of really understood the artifice and the masks with him, like even in as using them in writing, how something is not what it seems. And also his beauty, his physical beauty, was something very appealing to me. He had something kind of irresistible. He was not, he looked very weird. If you see the Ziggy Stardust thing again, he looks a bit like a snake with those, like, the teeth are wrong. And in that famous show, when Ziggy Stardust say goodbye, people were like having sex there. He was, I mean, the ceremonies to get the darkness are a bit like a rock show. And I was thinking a bit when I was watching that movie, to think it was very dark. The concerts in the 60s are very dark, which is very strange. And the people are in the dark, and they were having sex to this man, god, star man, whatever. So there is a reason why he is in the book as a cameo, let's say, and he's one of the lovers of Rosario at one point, and they speak about Borges and mirrors, which is something that gives the thing of the double that I think Bowie was one of the themes in his one of the many themes in his work. And Nick Cave, to me, I love his take on religion and on mysticism, which is maybe not the most obvious thing that will come to you, and the violence, like the way he always wrote about violence, and I'm turning red when I say violence, and
that was weird.
I know. He always wrote about violence, and I was listening to him when I was very young, and I was never put off by it. I thought that this is a man exploring desire. This is a man exploring violence. This is a man exploring death in a way. And the fact that in the last years of his life, death came to his children. Like, it's so very mythic in a way. It's like, the gods are taking vengeance on you, man. You messed with it too much. And yeah, and there's also this power on stage when you are capable of, transforming into something else. That to me was very important in the character of Juan, and in a bit in the character of Stephen. That is kind of it's like the guitar player, isn't something like that.
John, you got anything else? I don't want to interrupt on this topic.
I will, but I'm going to wait for Brennan to start talking, and then I'm going to interrupt him.
John stole my music question.
No, he didn't interrupt me. He muted himself. That's fine. So actually, since you brought up violence, and since your screen turned blood red, and obviously the gods want us to go in that direction, I had read an interview where you said something about the importance of readers understanding the violence in your work in context. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I in general don't have a problem with violence, and I don't think it has to be justified, because we live in a very violent societies, let's say. So that violence appears in a work of fiction is absolutely normal to me, and even necessary, because sometimes when you put violence in a work of fiction is kind of more memorable. And I always, for example, I know it's not because Paul is there, but I always read. That doesn't happen that much here. But I know in America you get a lot of intruders in your house. You even have a phrase for it, but it's not very common here. And I always thought that, oh, that's scary. But when I read the novel, The Cabin, I was like, oh, that's how it feels. And because there's something about the truth of fiction that makes it more real than reality. But to me, it's important when I can talk about it, because I think that you can read the book without knowing this. But when I can talk about it, I think it's important for people to know that this is a novel that starts in the 80s, when the country was under a dictatorship that were making bodies disappear, throwing bodies to the river, torturing people, making pregnant women having children in the back of cars and taking their children and giving to another families, and then killing the mother without even let them like hug the child for once. And all this information came like in the second part of the novel, what's in the background. And all this thing about this girl Omaira, that is true story. And I saw this girl dying in Colombia under there was a volcano and then a landslide, and she died in the landslide. And there was a climate of we were learning in the media everywhere the crimes of the dictatorship, not just in my country, but many things that were happening in Chile and everywhere. Like the 70s were the 70s and the early 80s were very, very, very violent in Latin America. So people were very used to it. So putting a girl that was dying on television and letting everybody see her agony, that also was very intrusive, because what can be more private than this? We were exposed to this all the time. Like I remember my father, when we were one of the few countries that got their dictatorships to the court, and they had a trial, and the movie is nominated for an Oscar. It's not very good, but it's important historically, and kind of puts in perspective what that was. But you can see even in the movie, and this is completely true. I read some reviews and I was like, screaming to the reviewer, but it was like that because they watch with the children someone talking about the tortures, how the tortures were, listening to the testimony of the victims. Everything is very horrifying. And I can remember my father, it would never, enter his mind to not let me hear this. On the contrary, he thought it was his civic duty to let me know all this, so I could understand how awful this was and why this could never happen again. So I was sitting with him, listening to the radio, to this awful stuff, and I remember my dad saying, see what they done, see what this, MFs did. And so it's important to me that the context in this way, that we are talking about a place and a time that was randomly violent in the discourse, in what was happening, and to me was completely normalized. So to write a novel about that period, and even of the aftermath of that period, violence is normalized. And it's unfortunate, but is there something I really don't like in literature is when it's dishonest, and especially when it tries to make nice something that wasn't. It was awful. And so yeah, I thought when I was writing that sometimes I was going very far away, but I can tell you 1,000 true stories that are further than this. And people tell you, but if there's so many awful things in the world, why write about them? Well, because of this effect that I was telling you before. It gives you, when you read it, the truth that fiction has. because otherwise it's one horrifying thing after the other, and then no one cares. And then there's a war here, and a mass shooting there, and whatever. And I think in my childhood and my teenage years, it was very much like that. Horror was in the air, and it was real.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, just the idea of keeping the memories, I guess, alive in the vein of, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And allowing readers to kind of glimpse into, readers who would not be familiar with that history or who are from another part of the world, to just kind of see, here's what happened here, and we can't allow that to, repeat itself.
Yeah. And also when I think about it, sometimes I also think how much I don't know of the violence that happened in other places. Like, there's a million things going on. And I think horror is a perfect genre to talk about it, because again, it gives you that sensation back. Because otherwise, I was talking to Fernanda Melchor, that is a Mexican writer, and she always thinks about how to write about violence being from Mexico, because it can be so extreme and can be so aestheticized too.
What was her name? Sorry to interrupt. What was her
Fernanda
name?
Melchor. It's I think one of her, Paradise is one of her novels, is just translated, and it's very, very good. It's like a very, very violent short novel that is like a bullet to your head.
It's called Paradise.
Paradise, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But spelled wrong, like paradise, not
DICE.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And because it's kind of the name of the resort where what happens, that I can tell you because it's very short. But and she's always thinking about it. And I think we the people of my generation in their 40s, we grew up on that. So we are really thinking about it. And in these other countries like Brazil or Mexico, or Colombia even, they're still living with that. So how you put it in fiction. And so it's I think violence is a huge problem for a writer, and also a huge responsibility for a writer. But I don't think you have to be timid. You have just to be true as much as you can.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, when I read the novel, thing that continuously struck me, especially since I just read it a second time, the juxtaposition of violence that wasn't tinged at all with the supernatural, and then the violence that was. And I don't want to call it a trick, but it almost was a trick where it made the real violence seem more disturbing in a way, with the comparison, and not that the supernatural violence wasn't disturbing either. Amazing. Let me build off of that to talk a little bit more about sort of the supernatural elements or the occult elements. Another thing that I thought you did an amazing job with and marveled at was just how organic the references to the magic, to the occult that were in the book. There wasn't a lot of explanation. There wasn't like, here are the rules of this magic. It was just more sort of almost like you're introduced to it, almost like in media res, as to how it works, or as how Juan sort of navigates, and then eventually Gaspar too. I know, but also at the same time, it's like, wow, did Mariana spend a lot of time studying the occult? I'm curious, that part of the book, did you find that super challenging, or was that easier to write about that stuff as opposed to what, obviously the dirty war and everything that actually happened around you?
Yeah. I mean, I was interested already, which you can guess. But I had to delve a bit, go a little more into it. Obviously, the order is based on the Hermetic order of the Golden Dawn. That has a lot to do with the fact that Bram Stoker was there, Aleister Crowley was there, W.B. Yeats was there, and also they did very, very nice tarots. Was a lot of women there. They had a lot of presence of women, so it's obviously based on that. But I read like 2 histories of the order that I didn't use anything. But you get into it, and then I got into rituals and all this kind of thing, and I used some, but which is very, I mean, I can't remember anything now, so it's not I'm going to start calling, because it was a long time ago, and it was all in the books. But Arthur Machen, that I can't really say his name, but I love it. Like the Great God Pan, I don't know how many times I read that short story. And at one point, a woman comes to Argentina, which was very, well, in the 30s, we were very rich and glamorous. And I studied a lot, but it wasn't difficult. But one thing that happened that is very curious is that when I wrote some of the rituals, or even putting some of the symbols, I changed them just in case. It's not that I believe, but I thought, I don't want this to be a manual. This is one thing. This is fiction. But also, I don't want this to open anything. And I felt a bit silly. But then there's a great movie by an Irish
A Dark Song.
filmmaker, A Dark Song, yeah. And the filmmaker did the same. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and every symbol, everything that happens in that house, all the words that I said, he changed it a bit. Because when you change it, magic, and this I learned a bit from Alan Moore, I guess I was reading him a lot too, is, saying things in a determined order to make a change in reality. That it's a bit what language is and literature is. You say things in a certain order, and something happens. Here's a story. Here's a poem. So that was a very useful concept to me. But at the same time, it was like there is this part of magic that is everything you do, even if you do it for good, it comes back. Like, what's above, as below is as above is below. I can say it in Spanish, como es arriba es abajo, but I can't remember how is it in English. So I was, just in case, let's not open this, study it like we are like in Victorian era interested in this kind of thing, but let's not play with this, because once you enter that, you realize that it's a system. It's you enter Enochian magic, chaos magic, John Dee. You saw that it has a history, and like it's heavy stuff. Even when they were wearing ridiculous gowns and doing what you can think they were with swords and whatever. But there's a lot of very for lack of a better word, very heavy energy there, and you can feel it when you're reading and what was going on. And so I was like, I don't want, and the same I did with the local occult things, like with the local saints, San La Muerte or Gauchito Hill. There's a whole, at one part, San La Muerte is like I have it here. This little guy here, you can see it, but, it's in my ring. It's very popular, as you can see. This I haven't made this ring for myself. I just bought it somewhere. Well, my husband bought it for me, but it's my wedding ring. But anyway, the San La Muerte, that is Saint Death, very different from the Mexican, but near that, and other lore and other things are quite spooky. I put like the whole prayer to San La Muerte, but I changed a lot of words. So if you say it out loud, it won't work, because it has to be said in a certain way.
It's the same saint in the Dirty Kid, correct? That's yeah. I kept that was the first story of yours I've read. So, But I think there's a lot of parallels between this novel and that
Yeah.
and that story.
Yeah, especially in the lore that I choose, because there's a lot, but those are the ones I'm more familiar with, and they're very present in the city. For example, like you can walk and find a little sanctuary to Gauchito Hill, for example, that is like a gaucho, like an Argentinian gaucho, but all in red. And the red is not because he's dressed in red, but it's blood, basically. So sometimes when I speak about context, is these kind of things that you can enjoy it anyway, but the thing is that he was decapitated, he's full of blood, and he's nice, but
We say the same thing about John. He's full of blood, but he's
full of
nice.
blood, but he's nice.
So we talked
I'm
about
wearing my red shirt. Yeah.
Mariana, at one point you mentioned Germans in Argentina, talked about the occult. I don't know if anyone else is going to bring it up, but for those that don't know, a lot of Nazi Germans went to Argentina to escape. And they were heavily studied and known for practicing the cult. I was wondering if there's anything that like I've seen certain documentaries on it, but I was wondering if you have any like comments on that maybe is only knowledge to people from Argentina. If not, we can move on to another question.
No, not really. I mean, but I kind of, I mean, that's part of the history, but I kind of try to say with the order, if they were working, or they were working in the 40s, they would have worked with the Nazis. Now they're in the 70s in Argentina, so they're working with a dictatorship. The Nazis were gone, or they were already, being taken to trial in Israel, most of them anyway, at that point.
Interesting.
And yeah, they were, most of them were, and then one of the big ones, Mengele, went to Brazil. Therefore, Ira Levin's the children of Brazil, because that's kind of true.
Yeah.
And he obviously didn't know what happened there, but he was there. And so, I mean, all this evil, it's in a way kind of represented in this order that controls bodies, that has total impunity. They're not just rich, because I didn't want to do like, this very kind of, I've seen a lot of this very trendy, let's blame it on the rich kind of, and the conspiracy theories about, the very rich and powerful in Hollywood. It's not that. It's more like a political thing. It's more like sometimes when things go very, very crazy in politics, they go a lot to the occult. It's quite amazing. The Nazis were to the occult, but for example, in Argentina, even the government before the dictatorship, it had a spiritualist in Hermano Daniel, brother Daniel, and he was using the body of Eva Perón, that was she's embalmed, that was in a glass cage in the house of Perón, trying to make this other woman that was the wife of Perón and it was president now, to get some of the charisma of this dead woman. So she was lying on top of the glass coffin, and
it's
this
super creepy.
It's super creepy. And yes, the Nazis went with all the Arthurian kind of myths, and trying to get the Grail and stuff. So there's always a part when it goes crazy. If you ever care to listen now to the authoritarian regime in Nicaragua, they are doing things about trying people to pray to this to a virgin. It doesn't necessarily have to be the occult in that sense, but the mystical, let's say, because when they start to lose earthly power, let's say, they go completely ballistic, and they try to go into this. I don't know if you know that the body of Eva Perón was also kidnapped.
No, I didn't.
She was kidnapped when she died.
Oh,
And taken to, well, first the body was as a mummy. It was a mummy already. The mummy was running around Buenos Aires for a while, and it ended up with a colonel, I think, that was completely crazy and raped the body, among other things.
Oh,
And so the president was a military president, but he was more or less a decent person, and said, well, this is over, and we take her out of the country. They were scared that if she stayed here, the body, there would be a cult around her. Now you kind of, when I tell you those things, you kind of get the context, There's going to be a cult around her. So they buried her in Milan under a different name.
Wow.
And eventually, Perón, that was living in Spain in exile, got someone to give her back to him in the military government, because we had many. The bloodiest was the last one, but we had many before. And he got her back, her body, and there started this thing with the spiritualist guy and the new wife, because the new wife was very dumb, the poor woman. So they were trying to get some of Eva's charisma to her, so they were using the body. So you see, wow. And I'm sure if I go to Brazil and I ask them about them, they will come to me with some story with Afro-Brazilian religions and their presidents. I'm 100% sure about this, because this is what happens when it goes too crazy.
I got one more question, and then whoever wants it, I'm going to throw that out there. What's the reception been like for English-speaking audiences or readers compared to, because this came out initially in your native tongue, Spanish, right? In 2019. Did it come up then?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
a few years ago.
In 2019. But I mean, you mean the reception between? Difficult to, because I'm here and I'm with the with the readers here that are very
sure
like rabid fans, and I get a lot of fan art and things like that. It's very weird, because it's not only young people, but people of my generation that kind of get I don't know, there's some things that are very resonant to them. But then in Spain, they don't know much about the history. I mean, we have the same language, but that doesn't mean that they know a lot about Latin America. And it really works there, so you never know. You never really. It works a lot in France. So it's like they are the kings of Cartesian thinking, apparently, but they're not, because they kind of really like it for some reason. I think they're remembering when they were into Baudelaire and Rimbaud, and remember that they had a symbolist past, and that there was crazy shit there too.
Yeah, of course.
That's funny. Sorry, because I had a question. I know John's next, but like.
No, that's totally fine, Paul. Just go ahead.
It's very
Run
brief
all
because
over
we
me.
just
That's
talked
all right.
about it.
Paul's a big shot now. He can do whatever the fuck he wants.
Paul's a big shot. He's got the M. Night Shyamalan.
Mute him.
That's
Mute
totally
him now. No, because seeing the response from fans on social media, it's been kind of fun, because I've seen like all the people, and it seems like a lot of really young people responding to this book, in Europe and in other places. So I was going to ask you, like, what do you think? I mean, here's this novel that's really in conversation with, obviously, the dirty war, but everything that had happened really almost like a 30, 40-year period, in Argentina. And here are these, like, we'll call them like early 20s, maybe even younger people drawing pictures of Juan and Gaspar, et cetera. What do you think, aside from maybe the obvious is that the best stories, even if they are set years ago, they are always talking about the now. Is there something in there that you think is really sort of maybe, it's probably a hard question for you to answer, but speaking to especially the younger fans or younger readers?
I think the younger readers get a lot of, Gaspar is a character that really appeals to them. And I think there's something about the complexity of the relationships, especially with the older generation, that they kind of get. And also there's something a bit edgy, I think. And I say this in the best way possible, because I was the same when I was 15. I wanted edgy things, slightly dangerous things that were not very perhaps appropriate for my age. And also there's been like this complete change in the how we talk about gender and sexuality and stuff. So all these characters are kind of pansexual. Partly is because I'm kind of in that wavelength, but also it has to do with the reasons within the logic of the book, because they're into ritual magic, so they really have to, the magical androgynous beings, and it has to magic doesn't have the the two gender sexes. It's like a more fluid kind of thing, so it has that logic. But I think that appeals, because for young people it's a very important thing now, and I realized that it appeals to them a lot. And I guess they're kind of I don't know, it's kind of strange to them that an old woman gets it. I don't know if I get it completely. It's the logic of the novel, and it's kind of my life. I mean, I come from punk rock, I come from rock and roll. To me, I don't come from a conservative at all wavelength. So, but I think there's something about that it's not a book that teaches them good manners or how to behave or how to be, they're all quite evil or quite, or quite ambiguous. And I think sometimes fiction for young adults can be very pedagogic and silly. And young people are smarter than that. I mean, you have young kids, how smart they are. And they get you, they see you coming from a mile. So I think, they, even if they're more protected than we were, but I guess there's a bit of that, but I can't really put my finger on it. There's sometimes I don't understand. Like, I love you. They're like that. And it's like, why? You don't know me. But yes, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, you're not an old woman. You're definitely younger than John. Okay, John.
That is actually true. So yes, you're not old. In fact, it's probable you're younger than Paul as well.
That's true.
So
Don't think so.
Yeah. It's
Paul's giving the finger for anyone that's listening.
No,
Oh,
I was saying my age.
John's taking out a chainsaw.
It's well, no, actually, what was fascinating to me before, is so Paul often makes fun of my musical taste, and my cinematic taste. But
No,
Paul is very much a to the heart punk rocker. As my younger son, he's kind of punk rock and metal anyway, but and one of the things that I've always loved and respected about Paul is that his kind of, as I see it, his aesthetic as a fiction writer is this kind of punk rock aesthetic that says, I am not going to pander. I am not going to make this sweet to you. I'm going to give it to you, as honestly as I can. And so when you were talking about horror as the genre that tells the truth, or at least, tells the truth through stories, or however you want to put that, but that it's the genre that says no, there is violence in the world, and horrible things happen to children, and people go into houses and never come out of them. And if you can get hung up on the details, but there's no real monsters, or there's no, that's beside the point. You're missing the larger point. And so I think that that punk rock aesthetic, as I'm calling it. I think that's in a weird way. I don't want to. I hate talking about morality, but it's at least kind of ethical to try to acknowledge the darkness, big D, small d, in the world. And it's funny because when you were talking about the way that authoritarian regimes move so quickly towards the sort of religious, I mean, what was Trump doing? Holding up the Bible upside down, but still holding up the Bible. I mean, some would say that was a sign,
Yes.
And I'm sorry not to make this for American listeners overly political, but you're going to have to deal with it.
It's all right. We don't like him either.
And you saw that. You saw the way that Trump and the religious right moved towards each other. This is our guy. This guy will give us what we want. And never mind all the compromises and the hypocrisy and whatever. So it strikes me, man, that is just, it's a constant. Sadly, the church is like, democracy, do we really need it? Is it really such a good thing after all? We can do without it as long as it's our guy, all right, as long as it's our church. As long as it's our church.
If your guy says the wrong thing, we'll just get a new guy.
Yeah. But actually, what fascinated me, was on another podcast I certainly wasn't listening to. You talked about the figure of the invuncha.
Oh, yeah.
And getting that from Alan Moore's Swamp Thing first. And I was like, I loved Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. That was so important to my development as a writer. Reading him and reading what, because he was bringing his reading of Faulkner and so on to the Swamp Thing. But it was like also all this crazy, it was the same kind of, and maybe I'm drawing a parallel between what I was talking about earlier and what you do in the novel, where, you suggest this vast, like everything is connected. We don't necessarily know how it's all connected, but there's a sensation that there are all these connections. And, in Moore's run, certainly in the first however many issues, he's bringing everything together and he's saying, no, all these different characters, they're all related, and he makes up John Constantine, but he also brings in all these other people. And I know he gave you a blurb for the book.
I know.
And I thought that must have been like an amazing moment.
I almost died. And he sent me his book of short stories and said to my friend Mariana, I've never talked to him. But I'm telling people, I'm
friends with Alan Moore.
I'm friends with Alan. Because I mean, John Constantine is obviously an influence in the book. But the Invunche and From Hell too, in a way, because the second chapter of From Hell, there is a masterpiece when he starts to, telling you this is related to this, and this architect is this, and this, the social cleansing of it was already there in all the signs, and this has to do with the Victorian era, but also with Thatcher, and you can see it. It's like, wow. And he tells you, history, we can say, as we said before, we have not to repeat the mistakes, but we do. This is what's going on. So that attitude of punk rock is always, trying to remember that we are flawed. The first punk rockers would, let's make ourselves ugly, let's make ourselves violent. Not really, but let's look like that. Because let's
play. We know 3 chords. Let's play those 3 chords.
Exactly, because we are a mirror of, let's be minimalistic and and awful, because this is what they are giving to us. So we are a reflection of that in a way. But that was my But I always like Springsteen and Dylan and the poets, because I'm a writer. So I was trafficking that. I was like, and then doing a bit of blonde on blonde on the side. But anyway, the Invunche is like it's a legend of the south of Chile, of the south of Chile, where supposedly there's an island that is ruled by the brujeria is called, it's witches, all male, and it's very cruel, it's very long also, the lore of that, but it's only in one little island in the south of Chile, not anywhere else. And the guy that guards the cave where they live is the imbunche. There is this child that they get when it's a baby, and they basically destroy. They make a hole here. They put the little leg go there, and they feed him human flesh, and it's kind of a monster. But it's kind of a monster also because they destroy their innocence. They made it, they made it a monster. And the first time I saw that, I knew that it existed because I knew about the legend. But the first time I saw it in some kind of literature was in Swamp Thing. And I was pretty amazed because I was like, my God, like in Latin America, we are not using this. And comes this British guy with the long hair and looking spooky. He's using it. And what's going on? And then I read it in Bruce Chatwin's In Patagonia.
Right.
And I was like, okay, again, this little beautiful British man comes because he had some kind of, I can't remember what kind of fish his grandfather had or something, kind of some leather in his house. And he always wanted to come to Patagonia, and he has 3 pages of describing this legend. And we don't use it because we think it's superstition, because this is a continent that is still very racist. And in literature, it shows a lot because literature is like the citadel of the white. And superstition can come in, indigenous beliefs can come in. We are looking at Europe more than looking actually at America. I think it would be more open that way. But the new generations don't have that because we are already, all that fiction of the Paris of South America is gone. We've been through hell. We've been through the whole Latin American experience, so that's gone. And when we realize that's gone, all those irrational things are part of our culture are growing in our literature because they always belong there. It was only an discrimination and an operation of the, because there's a lot of power also in literature on what can be said, what not can be said. And as horror writers, we know that they push you aside for no reason, and you always kind of justify ourselves, like saying, oh, but Henry James wrote The Turn of the Screw.
Believe me.
And it really puts me in a bad mood because sometimes I do it too. I do it like, oh, but this is, it's Henry James and he was writing about ghosts.
You wrote a book which has not been translated, which frustrates me because as an American, I only know one language, and barely that. But you wrote a book on Silvina Ocampo.
Yeah.
What was the impetus there? Because I only know her work in English, but I thought, oh, well, I presume she's important to you, but I just wondered if you could talk about that for a moment.
Well, she's a short story writer that was a very upper class woman, but she was the best friend of Borges, but she didn't do like socially anything that was expected from her. She didn't do charity stuff. She didn't dress well. Her hair was a mess. And she used her money to do whatever she wanted. And her short stories are of a cruelty, and of a black humor, so intense that I remember reading her very young and not understanding it. I don't understand, and this is my language, and this is my, the names of the streets I recognize, but this, disdain and this, fury that was in her stories, I didn't understand. And for example, I make it short. There's a very famous story that is about a very rich woman that wants a velvet dress in the middle of the summer. So she asks for her servant to go pick it for her. And this woman has to go, in a day that she's not supposed to work. And you can see how bad she's treating her. This is very classic of the upper classes in this country. Sorry, I'm trying to make me not red. And she ends up dying basically of the heat of the velvet. but it's kind of a curse that this woman, but it's a class. I didn't understand it because it's a class satire, but it was written from the point of view of the servant, not of the rich woman. She was like, you deserve this, you are awful people. And she was like so blunt in this. I can't be that blunt. I'm always trying to be more ambiguous, but she was like, and I think it was suggested to me, because to make a non-fiction book is a lot of work, much more than a fiction book.
Yeah.
Because you have to investigate, have conversations with people. People are difficult. You have to do interviews. You have to, you have to read all the academic stuff, and then you have to read all her work. Thankfully, she didn't keep a diary, because that, kills you when you're doing something like that. But when they offered her to me, I said yes. First, because it's one of the few women that were writing those days, and this is because she was rich, basically. But also because there's a fury and an observation of class in her writing, and of cruelty, and of the cruelty of when there's such a class gap that is impossible to, such injustices in any society. And she does it with a lot of black humor, because she knows that she's part of the problem. So that's why I didn't understand it, because she's very complex. And that's why I decided to go into that complexity. And that helped me a lot for Our Share of Night, and making the characters of the rich people. Because, to be honest, before that, I've never been in a mansion. But when I was doing that investigation, I was in a lot of them. And I could describe them. Before that, I wanted them in Our Share of Night to be rich, but I was like, and how exactly does it look? A house of rich people here. That is not a movie, So
Yeah.
it was helpful. Yeah.
Well, I hope it gets translated. I'm sorry, because I'm lazy, and it's not as if I'm going to learn Spanish. So I'm just like, oh, translate it for me. Your poor translator. I'm like, get to work on that. Come on.
I think the only mansion I've ever been in, I want to say, is they do tours in this part of Rhode Island, where you can, I think it's like during Christmas time, where you can pay to walk in a mansion. Beyond that, blue collar here. And I think all you guys are too. Just throwing out that random tidbit. So I just wanted to get to.
Well, Tremblay used to be blue collar, but not anymore. Not anymore, man. I'll tell you. You should see the place he's living in now. It's got weird little heads in it and everything.
Really?
Look, he's going to show you. Look at that. Yeah, there it is.
That's my non-horror son. I don't know why he has that.
One of my best friends lives in the same town that Paul does, and I think.
Whoa, what's that? I promise it's not here.
What is that?
It's not here either.
No, it was Brendan.
Paul, what are you doing?
Brendan.
Threw off my train of thought. Jerk.
Someone lives in the same town as Paul and spies on him on a regular basis.
Yeah, I don't know.
He gives you daily reports of what Paul is doing. He's like, he has this strange little head that he calls it his non-horror son. We don't know what that means.
I mean, so many
very
things,
tall.
man.
He's still very tall. He just got a haircut not that long ago.
I don't know how that reminded me, but we got a question for you from Twitter, and someone asked, thanks for sorry, read the wrong thing. Was the haunted house that Gaspar and his friends visited where they lose Adela based on a house in real life?
No, not at all. There was a house I didn't like in my mother's neighborhood that we never saw anybody come out of it or go in. That was very spooky. And I always kind of asked in the neighborhood who lives there, and nobody knew.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a little suggestion, but no, it's if anything, it's taken a bit from House of Leaves of Danielewski.
Paul loves that book. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Paul.
Well, I'll say you also used that house, right, in a short story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I took the house from the short story to the novel because I needed a house that eats people, basically. And I was like, oh, I wrote it already, and I liked how it was in the short story. So it was the early stages of the novel. So I said, well, let's bring the girl too to see what happens. And it opened. Everything was amazing. But my plan was the house at first, not the girl. The girl has, yeah.
There's one other question, not from today, but last week. Someone, and if you don't want to answer this, that's fine, or we could cut this part. Someone asked if you're ever coming back on Twitter. I know there's probably at least, I saw at least one article on it. If you, like I said, if you don't want to answer that, more than okay, we can pass.
I think my life is better without Twitter. Basically,
We should follow your lead.
It's too aggressive and it's too silly, and I get mad and I end up in stupid arguments with people, and because I
understand.
I should not, but I can't let it pass sometimes, and I go to bed. I remember like the early days of the internet when you were in newsletters and stuff like that, and you were like thinking, or in and no, I have to answer this, and you were like in 2 a.m. answering some point about something. I said, no, I can't waste time like this anymore. So no, I don't think so.
That is
but
smart.
not because I'm scared of the
No.
of getting into an argument or anything. It's just it was like relieved, and I was like, why are we doing this to ourselves? It was very, I don't know.
Feels like Paul has a comment. So, Paul, am I misreading that?
Misreading? No, I would say we should I just said we should follow her Twitter lead.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Since I cut off John before, John, do you have something or
Actually,
Brendan?
I did have a question because Mariana, I have the sense that you and Samantha Schweblin are friendly or and I was thinking, for various reasons, which mostly have to do with the fact that we're both old. Paul and I have been talking in recent months, just kind of remembering what it was like when we got together. Like we just met each other at a convention, and we were on a panel together, and we liked each other's work. And
John followed me up to my hotel room. I was like,
I
John,
did.
I was
like, he was
like, your key, man.
Yeah, he was like, buy my book. It's a whole long story. He was like, I was like, I only have $10. He was like, really? And I was like, okay, I have $20. So I bought his book. But like and that friendship has been one of the great friendships of my life. And it's led to like a certain kind of, I don't know, like artistic inspiration back and forth. I read Paul's stuff sometimes and I think I got to do better. I got to do better because, Peter Straub had 20 or 30 years on me. So if he was better, I could say, well, he's been doing it for 20 years longer than I have. But, I read the Pallbearers Club and I'm just like, mother, because I'm just like, this is as good as it gets, and so I don't know. I just, there are people like, Laird Barron and so on that are also part of our friend group. And it's the same thing. We're just friends. But I think to myself, sometimes I think, man, like 100 years from now, how will this look? I mean, assuming we're,
how will the cockroach creatures enjoy our novels?
Like, we see the three of them together. Were they gods? Were they devils? Probably devils. But do you find that yourself that you have other writers? And I mentioned Samantha because that's just the only, that you have a similar relationship with, or
I do. There's but as with Samantha, for example, she lives in Berlin. She doesn't live here. She lives in Germany. And we never read our stuff. She's a much more, I guess, I don't know. She's a much more cerebral writer than I am.
Surrealistic,
but but also she's very disciplined. But we exchange things. We read like crazy. I remember when we discovered Robert Aikman. I read the first stories that were translated into Spanish by Robert Aikman because I didn't know him. And it was very difficult to find his stuff in English. It was amazingly expensive.
Yeah.
And so I read this, I think it's the Bells story that is absolutely insane. And I remember being on the phone with her and say, you have to read this. They can't find the beach. And then and we are a lot like that. And she's like, you have to read Edgar Queret and you have to read M. John Harrison. And we're like, no, this kind of crazy reading thing. And we met in actually because we were in an anthology of young fiction together, not even horror or anything, and we hit it off because we are almost the same age and we had the same kind of I don't know, interests in literature. But now when we meet, and we meet in crazy places of the world, because she lives in there, so in Tours, we talk about our lives basically, and books, but not our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We have to read this. I knew, oh, you have no idea, this blah blah, and yeah, and I have kind of a relationship. I try to keep up with what's going on here because there's many things going on here, like in Latin America and in Spain too. And I have another friend that she's called Laura Fernandez, that she's absolutely amazing. And I wish she's translated to English because she writes as in translation. Like you read her stuff and it reads in Spanish, that is the Spanish in translation that she read when she was young in translation. She's like John Irving on acid, but not a very bad acid.
Uh-huh.
Like, and it's very long and absolutely insane what she does. And we talk about, we talk books a lot, like, and she gives me like a whole other perspective because she reads different things. She's a super fan of Joy Williams. She's that kind of, quirky kind of reader. So, and that has to do a lot with Spanish literature. Otherwise, she would kill me if she hears this. But with El Quijote, for example, that kind of, very long and very crazy kind of narrative, and very funny and very sad at the same time. Like it's a tragedy what happens to him, and and she's kind of that. So I have more friends that are writers now than I was younger. When I was younger, I was more into musicians, dealers, whatever. Right. But now it's writers. And by the way, how is Lael Barron doing? I was very worried. I think he's amazing.
He will be delighted to hear that he is home.
Great!
Which was fantastic news. Patrick and Brennan let me record a little intro to help to raise money for his GoFundMe, and at this point, he's a long way to go to recover. But he had gotten into a kind of a bad place in his life where I think he didn't realize how many people love and esteem his work. And so all of a sudden, when people, it wasn't just that they contributed to the GoFundMe, it was that they sent these messages. And I would read him the messages because his vision was so bad from the uncontrolled diabetes that he couldn't read particularly well. So, I remember there was one woman whose message, I guess this is the one that really got to me, said, it was something like, Mr. Barron, my husband many years ago was having a very bad time and he read your stuff, and believe it or not, it got him through that bad time. And so he was able to come to me, and she said, I will always support you because you saved my husband for me. What writer? I mean, how do you respond to that? Yeah. How do you? So he has a new novella coming out, was Coleridge series, in a couple months, I think. Yeah. And then he's going to work on he has this insane fantasy series right now, which takes his Coleridge characters and it kind of puts them in, I don't even know how to describe it. It's sort of like a mix of Conan and Game of Thrones. And it's just this really weird, brutal but his
Yeah.
writing is some of his
Animated, yeah.
best writing ever. And so he's going to write a novel. That's his plan now.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
refers to
because
it
he's-
as his novels of antiquity.
Yeah, he calls it antiquity. It's all set in antiquity,
Yeah.
but antiquity may also be the far future, because there were like cyborgs will show up, or things will happen, and the characters won't understand them, but you understand. Oh my God, that's some kind of alien technology or something.
Yeah.
It's
No,
nuts.
I think he's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I have this occultation it was very important for me, but there's another one that even had an influence in Our Share of Night, because there's a short story that, of course, I won't find here. I'm with the Kindle, but I probably have it in some, in a real book somewhere in the house. That at some point is the guy that is the protagonist is like a kind of a god hiding, and he hides. It starts in a when they are looking for him, because there have been some, and he kind of shows something. It's very really doesn't tell you a lot about
Is it
who he is or what he is.
Shiva, open your eye?
Shiva, open your eye.
That was
And
the
it
first.
and it ends up with a phrase that says, "I know because I am the mouse of God." And I thought, or something like that. But I thought that that's what I want. I want a God that eats people, that literally eats people. So it was very, very influential. I remember, underlining that and having that in my little notebook, and it's somewhere there. So you can tell him that.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
now, yeah, I was gonna say, now John and I want to kill Laird for a
But that was actually how, in a way, how we met, was that we both published stories in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. Mine appeared in the August issue, his appeared in the September issue, or vice versa. And the editor contacted both of us and said, I think you should read this guy's work, because I think you might get what this guy is doing. So we wrote each other these terribly formal emails, dear Mr. Barron, I am writing, dear Mr. Langan, thank you for your kind inquiry. And, here we are 20 plus years later. That's wonderful. Yeah, I agree with Paul, though. Yeah.
Well, I know this is going to harken back to something you guys talked about like 10 minutes ago, but I have to add, one, John and I do go to very strange and crazy places like Braintree, Massachusetts, Quincy.
Wait, just break down that name, Braintree.
Yeah, Braintree. Yeah. John, thank you for the very kind words. And I would say to everybody out there, January, when things got like crazy busy, to help me sort of just like refocus myself. I don't have the time to reread a lot of books. I wish I did have more time, but I reread John's The Fisherman, and then I reread Mariana's Our Share of Night. And those two books I thought actually fit so wonderfully together back to back, to the point where
I do. I think so. Yeah.
I'm having a hard time reading books by other mere mortals.
At the time, though, what he said was, wow, Langan, after having read Mariana's book again, your book is terrible. Come on.
Say that.
It was, totally. Thank you.
No, we're good. The three of us are good. I read. Yeah, it's true. I read Paul Bearer's, and I won the physical one. So
absolutely.
Ask someone to send it to me or something.
I will.
But it's brilliant, and I will write to you about it too.
Well,
Mariana must have. I feel like you must have a leather jacket. You must have a jacket like.
She has it all the time. So. Shoot! What the hell was I just gonna say? No, damn it!
John interrupted you. I thought that was rude.
No.
That was my plan.
The other. Well, another thing. I mean, I would just say briefly that I feel like I'm going to change my reading habits. I don't know why I don't do this more often, but partly it's because I don't get to read books. I think I said this to Mariana, but I want to say it again. That, man, I'm going to, from now on, when I finish a book, I'm going to go back and reread the first line, because the first line of Our Share of Night is the amazing. And I'm curious if you wrote it, if this was the first line or you went back and changed it, but the opening line was, there was so much light. At least that's what it's translated in English.
No, it is había tanta luz. Sí, it's the same in Spanish. I don't write chronologically, so I don't really know when I wrote that, but I thought that a light had to be at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so many times I think that I don't like when a novel or a short story starts when people wake up or in the morning, because it's kind of, like a narration starts with conscience, and it kind of, I don't know, it hits me wrong. But in this case, I thought it was appropriate because it was like an awakening in a way.
I would definitely was.
So I wanted light to be there. I have it here in Spanish, I think. And I think it's the same. Megan is very tanta luz esa mañana. Yes, the same. So much light that morning would be like the exact, but Megan is smarter than that. She's very good. She's very good, actually. We share the same translator with Samantha Schwebling, which is kind of, very fortunate in a way, because I read the translations, what she does with Samantha stuff and mine, and it's completely different. And she gets the differences that we have, even, I think we read the same stuff even, and, but with Samantha, and this, maybe we have to end, but I had some very particular thing. We were in a reading with both of us and a writer that was kind of, we really didn't like what he did anyway. So we were like, what you do in those cases with your friend, that you kick each other from under the the panel, like, and then I didn't know what she was going to read, and she wrote and she started to read the start of Fever Dream, that is very scary. And I remember people were silent, and I was reading that and being very scared, and at the same time very envious. It was like, how didn't you tell me anything? That you were preparing this, hell, this madness, this child that is only saying, pay attention, and is like the scariest thing ever. And people were like, absolutely silent. Then I had to read, and what I read, it was like, okay, whatever, this, some gore stuff here, zombie children, I don't know. And I mean, what she does with language sometimes, it's important, I think, to have a relationship with writers that you admire, that you really think they're good and they're better than you. It's kind of, and different. It's kind of healthy, because I know many writers that are so full of themselves, and it's.
We call them assholes here in America.
I know, yeah. We call them, but it's more rude how we call them here. Yeah.
But there was many years ago. My wife is a big Kerouac scholar, and so we wound up having lunch with a musician, David Amram. He had done the score to the short beat film "Pull My Daisy." Anyway, he's a lovely guy, and he had crazy experiences. He knew Charlie Parker, all this kind of stuff. And at one point, he was talking about Allen Ginsberg. I hope I'm not telling tales out of school, but he said, he always felt that Allen surrounded himself with people to make sure that he was the smartest one in the room. Yeah. And that for that reason, David was like, well, okay, but he wanted to surround himself with people who were smarter than he was. And that was important to him to, if you feel you're the smartest person in the room, what reason is there for you to grow as an artist or, as a person, whatever. And if, and so, it's frustrating sometimes, but it's ultimately, I think what you need to do, especially I think as you get older as an artist. I feel like when you're younger, you're like, whatever, but then you get older, it's important to keep, even if it's with younger people, even to hang out with younger, more talented people, or equally talented, at least. Paul would say, I'm younger than you are. So
now I would say, life like vampires, we're going to suck off the life and talent of those people.
I remember also, like, and nowadays there's a very, very brilliant writer. I hope he gets translated from Bolivia. It's called Maximiliano Barrientos, that wrote like a crazy thing of gods coming from cars. It's like a bit Ballard, a bit Cronenberg, a bit Mad Max, and a bit Andes mythology. He's absolutely amazing.
Sounds cool.
And it's very cool. He's quite extreme too. He has a perception of violence that is kind of, he makes it disgusting, like he has this ability of not glamorizing it ever, and I think he's absolutely amazing. And the other day we were like going crazy about it was he discovered Brian Evanson, and he was like,
What is this?
what is this? Like, whoa. I thought it was weird. This is like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then a week later, my translator, I think Brian is doing some kind of horror thing for like a compilation or something like that. And he asked me for a book, and I was crazy. I was like, no, but I mean, he's too good. Why would he want a book of mine? And I think, I'm a fan of things, and having that kind of admiration and being a fan of things, like, keeps me attentive and keeps me, I don't want to be better than the other, but it gives me ideas. This is the thing. Like, it really gives me ideas. That's what I mentioned, that Shiva story, because to me, I read and I said, yes, that's what I want. A God that is hiding from view, and a God that eats. And that was just, the spark. It has nothing to do with that. But that spark came from that short story. So,
well,
I owe him a lot. Yeah.
There's room for all of us, I hope. Like there's room for all of us to succeed.
Yeah, except Brian Evanson owes me money.
Oh yeah, me too. That guy, that guy, he's terrible. But Brian has a book called Contagion. It's a collection of stories.
It's an early one.
It's only available right now in the audiobook version, which is read by Brian. It's read by Brian Evanson, and it's brilliant. Honestly, listening to it and listening to the way that he read it, his pronunciations, I just came away and I thought, did I have any doubt this guy was a great writer? If I did, this book puts that to rest. This guy is just he's funny. He's weird. I highly recommend it.
So it's called Contagion and Other Stories.
Contagion and Other Stories, or
Gotcha.
if you just look for the audiobook, Contagion and Other Stories, Brian Evanson, and there are moments that are laugh out loud funny, which is not something I really associate with Brian's fiction.
It's a really neat cover, at least the one I'm looking at. It's got 3 riders.
Barbed wire on it.
Okay.
There's a story about the religion of barbed wire, basically.
That's a neat thing.
Yeah.
So keeping it to, because it's almost 10 where Mariana is. So this is gonna be the part where we start to wrap up. And we'll start with currently reading. Mariana, what are you currently reading?
Currently reading. Well, it's actually here. It's not horror at all.
No, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is. What is that?
It's a Czech
writer
cover. That's called Bohumil Rabal, and it's called I Serve the King of England. And it's absolutely beautiful.
Is it fiction, nonfiction, or?
It's fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction.
Really like that
when
artwork.
was it? Yeah. I was in a kick. I was, trying to read stuff that was not from Latin America or from the US or from the usual countries. I don't know why. I had, sometimes I put these kind of missions to me. Like, my mission now is read Eastern European stuff. And so I was reading this and Solenoid by Mircea Cartarescu. That is a Romanian, and he's absolutely amazing, but it's 800 pages, so you have to invest yourself in that.
Do you prefer physical? This is actually a Twitter question. Do you prefer, and it applies, physical or digital reading?
No, I'm okay with reading both of them, but lately I prefer digital because this is, you can see, this is a mess. Like, I mean, and this is only one room, and there's many others. So it's like, it's time to stop.
Paul, what are you currently reading?
I just finished Sean Cosby's first novel, My Darkest Prayer. So it's a reissue. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I really enjoy his crime fiction. I have a few like books that I'm supposed to read for blurbs. A couple of titles escape me but I'm excited to read Richard Cardre's novella. Again, something that'll be published later in the year. So I'm looking forward to that.
Forgot that I was muted. Awesome. John, what are you currently reading?
I don't read. Readings for suckers. No, actually, I just got this in the mail. It's a graphic novel adaptation of The House on the Borderland.
Oh wow!
And it's done by Richard Corbin, the recently deceased, and it is beautiful. And I'm
Like that artwork.
Yeah, I love Corbin's artwork. It was so distinctive. I like Alan Moore, right? I came to reading through comic books, and there's a ton. Actually, I'm in the middle. To be honest, there's a new run of the Swamp Thing. There's a guy named James Tynion who's written just a bunch of really cool comics. Something is Killing the Children is
that's amazing.
Yes, right. And only
ago, it's amazing.
Yeah, because like only the children can see the monsters, and there are monsters.
That's a
and they are
title,
monsters. Right? It's not.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's not a metaphor, and he's also writing a book, a comic called The House of Slaughter, which is about the people who kill those monsters, who may also kill you, because sometimes adults, it happens, they can see them. And hey, if you see the monster and the people who kill them, those, and there's a lot. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of horror comics and such at the moment. That's where my head is at.
You said his name's James Tynion.
Tynion. Yeah.
Gotcha.
There's also a great comic. I read a little bit longer ago, called Witches. Wytches. Scott Snyder maybe wrote it. And the Witches, I don't know if this is giving too much away. You can mute this if you don't want a spoiler, but the witches there are actually like other creatures. They're not, and I was amazed at how good it was, and it stopped kind of on a cliffhanger, and he has never published. He published another a short sort of filler story, but he's never gotten back to that story. Scott Snyder, if you're listening to this, come on, man. Come on, man. Come on. What are we doing?
Finish it.
Yeah, come on.
Don't pull George R.R. Martin. Who said that? Damn it.
Poor George R.R. Martin. He gets.
Well, there's another one. Patrick Rothfuss was, he's a big fantasy writer, and he's only got. He's just going to finish the third book, and he said he finished it years ago. So I don't know, man. Something about fantasy. I want to read those books, but I just don't want to love them and wait forever. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I don't envy their position either, because that's too much pressure. Because Mariana, you were talking about crazy fans earlier, and it's I mean, like, even the most extroverted fans, writers, like, I'm very social. Clearly I got a podcast, but like, it would be super weird to get like fan art sent to my house from someone I don't know. So I don't, I don't know. I don't know how much fan mail you get, but Paul, same for you. But I can imagine that's just none.
No, yeah, I get no fan mail to the house.
Well, what's your address? Just tell us.
Yeah.
Moving on, Brendan. What are you currently reading?
I am reading The Book Eaters by Sun Dean.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I'm about halfway through it, and I mostly picked it up because I was looking for books that were kind of vampire novels, kind of in the vein of like Dan Simmons' Carry On Comfort. And this one's hitting it. It's almost more fantasy than anything else, but it's kind of got that idea of, the main, group of people, they, as the title suggests, they eat books, and kind of absorb knowledge that way. And then there's, kind of a subset of that group that feeds directly off of minds. And that's kind of where the vampire aspect comes in. But man, the visual image of the book eaters have these things called book teeth that kind of descend so that they can get through like the hardcover and tear it apart. Oh man, like that there's where your horror comes in. But
wow.
And in the vein of rereads, I'm also rereading Joe Hill's Heart-Shaped Box because it's fucking awesome. And I love going back to a book that, you know, I read so much every year, and so much is good, but there's something about digging into a book that you're like, it's home. I know what this is going to be. I already know I'm going to enjoy it. And now I can kind of look for the things that Hill does well and try and suss them out and figure out, you know, how I can do that better in my own writing. So that's what I'm at. Patrick, how about you?
Reverse engineering, man. So I am, oh God, I don't have the physical copy. Yeah, it's blurring. I'm reading the Saga of Deadeye. It's by Ronald Kelly. It's a horror western about a zombie now gunslinger, and he battles in the first book vampires. This one's werewolves. So it's just a fun read. It's a really fun take on familiar monsters. I would recommend it if you're looking for some horror westerns. And now's the part where we go to final thoughts. We'll start with you, Mariana. Do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I had a good time. It's not a thought, but it's a feeling, so it's kind of better. And about rereading, I remember when he died, because I love Peter Straub. Houses without doors.
Without
Houses without
Windows?
doors.
yes, without
Yeah.
doors. Yeah.
Genius. That was another moment of, man, what's the point?
Yeah.
He was beautiful. He was a beautiful writer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a great time. John, meeting you is like, you know,
No,
amazing.
likewise.
And Paul, like, we see each other a lot now. We should
Yeah.
see each other in the flesh. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, you know, before you get too famous, man.
Nah.
You
That's what he says, but you should have seen him at Boscone this weekend. It was
John, final thoughts, sir.
I am very grateful I got to do this. Thank you so much for inviting me, Mariana. It was just absolutely a pleasure and a joy to meet you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
yeah, Patrick wanted me to come on to embarrass Brennan a lot, and also Paul. I will do that in a future episode.
Rivalry.
Right, but I'm glad that we got to do this. This was really lovely. It really made my day. Thank you.
Paul.
Yeah, I mean, everything everyone said. This was a lot of fun. It was wonderful to be here. I'm greedy for more translations of Mariana's work.
Same.
Yes,
Make it happen, Mariana.
quickly.
I'm finishing a book of short stories as we speak. So
Oh,
Ooh.
excellent.
Well, let her
So-
out of the cellar for a little bit of food and water, and then send her back down to.
So, you know, hopefully they're finished by March, I think. I have 8. I want 12 just because it's my luck number. But, you know,
Nice.
it's done. Yeah. I
Brennan,
don't know what happened to me.
Sorry.
I was in the middle of the novel and then those stories happen. Yeah, that happens.
That's cool though, because then you get to go back to that novel.
Yeah.
Brennan, final thoughts, sir.
Not much to add that you guys didn't already hit. I mean, what a privilege it is to be able to host the three of you and just hear you, you know, writers of your caliber talk about each other's work and, for lack of better words, gush. I mean, this is one of the reasons that Patrick and I do this, is to just kind of be able to host a conversation like this that you're not going to necessarily get to hear anywhere else. And it lived up to it. I really enjoyed listening to the three of you talk today. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you for making it possible.
Yeah,
Even you,
thank
John.
We're done.
Yeah. Go to hell.
Even
Brennan.
John.
You know what? Fuck yourself, Langan.
Oh, I think they like each other.
Brennan, we gotta hang out more.
I'll bet we could make him cry if we tried real hard.
I'm just going to hang out with my new best friend, Patrick. Take that, Brennan.
Oh, cool. Because I love the fisherman. Yeah, same. I mean, Mariana, you're always, and if I'm mispronouncing it, because I say words weird, then please correct me and just slap me with a stick or something. Bad dog over here. That's not funny. Move on. Okay. You're always welcome here, even if I'm super awkward right now. But I did want to say Peter Straub was someone that I could relate our share of night to. Not because you brought him up, but it's the fact that if you're categorizing it by genre, it's literary, but at the same time, when you put horror or supernatural aspects in it, it's really visceral. You don't shy away, and that you kind of cover that it's our job as writers to tell the truth. It is where fiction's a reflection of reality. I mean, no matter what you're writing, it's everyone's got a different view of it, but you talked about a world that I wasn't familiar with, and boy, do I want to know more about that. I'm upset because I can't read other languages but beyond English. So it makes me wonder how many other phenomenal artists am I going to miss out in my entire life? You know, so that's what you did for me personally. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and seriously, it's been an honor. Always welcome back. And I just, Paul and John, genuinely love you guys and enjoy talking to you guys. So thank you. Brennan, John might be my new best friend. So it was fun while it lasted. Next episode is with Erica T. Worth and Grady Hendrix. As always, you have many choices in podcasts. Thank you for picking us. And Langan, only come on the show, motherfucker. I guess that's how I'm ending it.
I like to host around.